A loud clatter of tin pans echoed through the dusty street as Virginia Davis tumbled from the stagecoach onto the dirt road of Cheyenne, Wyoming territory. It was May 1878, and she had arrived with nothing but a carpet-bag of belongings, a letter of employment, and the crushing weight of a past she'd fled in Boston. "Watch yourself there, miss," the stagecoach driver called down, tossing her second bag beside her. "Cheyenne ain't kind to the clumsy." Virginia brushed the dust from her plain blue traveling dress and adjusted her bonnet, which had slipped during her ungraceful descent. At 30 years old, she'd expected to have a husband and a home full of children by now. Instead, she stood alone in a frontier town with only a promise of employment as a cook on a cattle ranch miles outside of town. She glanced at the letter in her hand, the paper worn from countless readings during her journey west. Mr. Ethan Young, Circle Y Ranch. The advertisement she'd answered had been simple enough. Cook needed for rancher and young family. Room and board provided. Good wages for capable woman. She'd been desperate enough to leave everything behind, hoping the Wyoming territory might offer what Boston could not, a fresh start. The main street of Cheyenne bustled with activity. Cowboys mingled with businessmen, and women in fine dresses walked alongside those in practical work clothes. Virginia took a deep breath of the dry air, so different from the dampness of Boston, and started toward the general store where she was to meet her new employer. Inside the store, the shopkeeper looked up as the bell above the door jingled. "Help you, madam? I'm looking for Mr. Ethan Young." "I'm his new cook," Virginia said, clutching her bags nervously. The shopkeeper's eyebrows rose slightly. "Ethan's in back settling his accounts. He'll be out shortly." His eyes lingered on her for a moment. "You're not what I expected." Before Virginia could ask what he meant, the back door opened, and a tall man stepped through. His broad shoulders filled the doorframe, and his face was partially obscured by the brim of a well-worn hat. When he lifted his head, she saw eyes the color of a summer sky, though they held little warmth. "Mr. Young," Virginia stepped forward, extending her hand. "I'm Virginia Davis, your new cook." Ethan Young studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he took her hand in a brief, firm grip. "Miss Davis." His voice was deep and roughened by the elements. "Got your telegram saying you'd arrive today. You're smaller than I imagined." Virginia straightened her spine. "I assure you, Mr. Young, my size has nothing to do with my abilities in the kitchen." Something flickered across his face, amusement, perhaps, but it was gone in an instant. "We'll see." He turned to the shopkeeper. "Jim, add Miss Davis's supplies to my order. We'll take them when we head out." Virginia found herself following him around the store as he gathered items from a list. "Mr. Young, the advertisement mentioned a young family. I assumed you had a wife and children." His shoulders stiffened. "No wife." He didn't elaborate further, continuing to move through the aisles with purpose. An hour later, Virginia found herself perched uncomfortably on the seat of a wagon beside the taciturn rancher, her bags secured in the back along with supplies. As they left Cheyenne behind, the sprawling landscape opened before them, endless plains stretching toward distant mountains. "It's beautiful," she murmured, more to herself than to her companion. "It's harsh," he replied without looking at her. "Winter will freeze you to your bones, summer will bake you alive, and spring floods what doesn't blow away in the fall. Beautiful doesn't keep you alive out here." Virginia fell silent, watching as the town disappeared behind them. They traveled for nearly 2 hours before Ethan finally spoke again. "My brother and his wife died 3 months ago. Influenza." His eyes remained fixed on the trail ahead. "Left behind their girls, 7 and 4. They're the young family you'll be cooking for." Understanding dawned on Virginia. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Young," he nodded once curtly. "I don't know much about raising children, especially girls. I need someone to cook proper meals and—" he hesitated, "teach them things women need to know." "I see." Virginia's heart quickened. Children. She'd always wanted children. "The advertisement didn't mention childcare," she said carefully. "Pays extra," he replied. "If you're not amenable, I can find someone else." The thought of being sent back to Cheyenne, or worse, Boston, made Virginia's stomach clench. "No, that won't be necessary. I'm quite fond of children." As they crested a small rise, a sprawling ranch came into view. A sturdy two-story house stood in the center, surrounded by corrals, a barn, and several outbuildings. Cattle dotted the pastures in the distance, and a creek wound its way across the property. "Circle Y," Ethan announced as they approached. "Been in my family for 15 years. My pa came out from Kentucky after the war, built it from nothing." As they pulled up to the house, the front door burst open and two small figures tumbled out. The older girl had dark hair like Ethan's, braided messily down her back. The younger one was fair-haired, clutching a ragged doll to her chest. Both wore dresses that had seen better days. "Uncle Ethan!" they cried in unison, racing toward the wagon. Ethan's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Girls, this is Miss Davis. She's going to be cooking for us and helping around the house." The older girl regarded Virginia with solemn blue eyes. "Can you make apple pie? Mama used to make apple pie." Virginia's heart clenched. "I make a very good apple pie, and I'd be happy to teach you if you'd like." The little girl's face brightened. "I'm Sophie. I'm 7. That's Lily. She's 4. She doesn't talk much since Mama and Papa went to heaven." Virginia climbed down from the wagon, kneeling to meet the younger girl's eyes. "Hello, Lily. It's very nice to meet you." Lily didn't speak but clutched her doll tighter, regarding Virginia with wary eyes. "Mrs. Hoffman from town's been staying with them," Ethan explained as he began unloading supplies. "She'll be heading back tomorrow." That evening, after preparing a simple supper of bacon, beans, and biscuits which Ethan ate in appreciative silence, Virginia found herself alone in a small but tidy bedroom off the kitchen. The room had clearly been hastily prepared. A vase of wildflowers sat on the dresser, likely the work of Sophie. Virginia unpacked her few belongings, including a small framed photograph of her parents, both now deceased. At the bottom of her bag was a tiny knitted baby booty, the only one she'd managed to complete before the doctor had delivered the devastating news 2 years ago. No children would ever come from her womb. She tucked the booty into a drawer, out of sight. Perhaps, she thought as she climbed into bed, this unexpected turn of events was Providence at work. She might never bear children of her own, but maybe she could still be a mother of sorts to these motherless girls. The following days established a rhythm to life at Circle Y Ranch. Virginia rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Ethan before he headed out with his ranch hands. The girls would wake later, and Virginia would feed them before starting on the day's chores: laundry, cleaning, baking, and preparing the midday and evening meals. Ethan remained distant, speaking to Virginia mainly about practical matters. He was gone for most of the day, working with his cattle and men, returning only for meals and to spend a brief time with the girls before they went to bed. Virginia noticed how his weathered face would soften when Sophie chattered about her day, or when Lily silently crawled into his lap with her book. A week after her arrival, Virginia was hanging laundry on the line when she heard a scream from the direction of the creek. Dropping the wet sheet, she hiked up her skirts and ran toward the sound. She found Sophie at the water's edge, crying hysterically. "Lily fell in," she sobbed, pointing at the rushing water. "She was trying to reach a flower." Virginia's heart stopped as she spotted the small form being carried downstream. Without hesitation, she plunged into the creek, the cold water shocking her system. Lily's blonde head disappeared beneath the surface, then bobbed up again. Virginia pushed forward, fighting the current until her fingers caught the child's dress. Pulling Lily against her chest, Virginia struggled toward the bank, her sodden skirts weighing her down. Just as her strength began to fail, strong hands gripped her arms, hauling both her and Lily to safety. Ethan had appeared from nowhere, his face pale beneath his tan. He took Lily from Virginia's arms, turning the child onto her side as she coughed up water. "Breathe, little one," he murmured, his voice breaking. "Breathe for your uncle." Lily's eyes fluttered open, and she began to cry, the first sound Virginia had heard her make since her arrival. Ethan gathered the child to his chest, rocking her gently, his eyes meeting Virginia's over Lily's head. "Thank you," he said simply, but the depth of emotion in those two words spoke volumes. That night, after the girls were tucked into bed, Ethan found Virginia in the kitchen, still shaken from the day's events. "You could have drowned today," he said, leaning against the doorframe. Virginia looked up from the dough she was kneading. "I couldn't let her drown, Mr. Young." "Ethan," he corrected. "After today, I think you've earned the right to use my given name." Virginia nodded, continuing to work the dough. "Ethan, then." He moved into the kitchen, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove. "You've been good with them, better than I expected. They're wonderful children. They've suffered a terrible loss, but they're resilient." Ethan sat at the table, cradling his coffee cup. "I don't know what I'm doing with them, Virginia. My brother James was the one who wanted a family. I was content with my cattle and my land. Now I have two little girls looking to me for everything, and I'm afraid I'll fail them." It was the most he'd spoken to her since her arrival. Virginia wiped her hands on her apron and sat across from him. "You won't fail them," she said softly. "You love them, that's clear to see. The rest, well, the rest we can figure out together." His eyes met hers, surprise evident in their blue depths. Virginia felt her cheeks warm. "I meant, that is, as long as I'm employed here, I'll do whatever I can to help." Ethan nodded slowly, and for the first time since she'd met him, a small smile curved his lips. "I'm grateful you answered that advertisement, Virginia Davis." As spring gave way to summer, the ranch bloomed with activity. Virginia settled into her role, not just as cook, but as a maternal figure to the girls. Sophie followed her everywhere, eager to learn cooking and sewing, while Lily gradually emerged from her shell of silence, beginning to speak in whispers, then in full sentences. One evening in late June, Virginia sat on the porch with the girls, teaching them to string beads while watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Miss Virginia," Sophie said, concentrating on her beadwork, "are you going to stay with us forever?" Virginia's hand stilled. "I'm here as long as your uncle needs me, Sophie." "Uncle Ethan says you make the best biscuits in the territory," Lily offered quietly, her small fingers carefully selecting a blue bead. "He smiles more now." Before Virginia could respond, the sound of hoofbeats announced Ethan's return. He dismounted from his horse, his tall frame silhouetted against the sunset. Virginia felt a flutter in her chest that she quickly dismissed. Her employer was becoming a friend, nothing more. Yet she couldn't deny that something had shifted between them since the day at the creek. Ethan sought her opinion on matters concerning the girls, lingered longer at the dinner table, and occasionally joined them in the evenings as Virginia read to the children. On the 4th of July, Ethan surprised them all by announcing they would attend the celebration in Cheyenne. The girls were ecstatic, and even Virginia found herself excited by the prospect of music, dancing, and socializing after months of relative isolation. The town was transformed with bunting and flags, a bandstand erected in the center of the main street. Families gathered for picnics, men competed in shooting contests, and children raced through the crowd with sparklers as dusk fell. Virginia wore her best dress, a deep green that brought out the honey tones in her brown hair. She'd allowed Sophie to weave a ribbon through her braid, and the little girl had declared her prettier than a picture book. As they wandered through the festivities, Virginia was acutely aware of Ethan beside her. He'd shaved for the occasion and wore a clean white shirt with his best waistcoat. More than once, she caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. When the dancing began, Sophie and Lily were invited to join a circle of children playing a game with ribbons. Ethan turned to Virginia, hesitation evident in his stance. "Would you care to dance, Virginia?" he asked, his voice gruff. She nodded, allowing him to lead her to where couples were forming for a reel. His hand was warm and calloused against hers, a working man's hand. As they joined the dance, Virginia found herself laughing as they circled each other, their steps matching surprisingly well. "You're a fine dancer, Mr. Young," she teased as they came together again. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," he replied, a rare grin lighting his face. "Said no young man would embarrass her at social gatherings." When the music slowed for a waltz, Ethan's hand settled on her waist, his touch light but firm. Virginia's heart raced as they moved together, closer than propriety might strictly allow. "The girls adore you," he said quietly. "You've brought life back to the house." Virginia glanced to where Sophie and Lily were watching them, giggling behind their hands. "They've brought joy to my life as well," she admitted. "I never thought—" She stopped herself. This wasn't the time to reveal her personal sorrows. "Never thought what?" Ethan prompted, guiding her through a turn. Virginia took a deep breath. "I was married once, briefly, in Boston. He left when we learned I couldn't have children." Ethan's step faltered slightly, but he recovered, his hand tightening on hers. "Then he was a fool," he said with unexpected vehemence. The music ended, and they stood for a moment, still connected, until the girls came running up, breaking the spell. Later that night, as fireworks exploded overhead, Virginia sat with Lily asleep in her lap and Sophie leaning against her side. Ethan sat beside them on the blanket he'd spread on the grass outside of town. "Is this what family feels like?" he asked quietly, his eyes on the bursts of color in the sky. Virginia looked at him, this man who had been a stranger 3 months ago. "Yes," she whispered. "I believe it is." Summer stretched on, the days growing hotter as July turned to August. The routine of the ranch continued, but subtle changes marked the passing weeks. Ethan began taking his meals with the girls and Virginia, rather than eating quickly before returning to work. He carved wooden animals for the girls in the evenings and taught Sophie to ride her own pony. Lily's nightmares, which had been frequent when Virginia first arrived, became rare. Virginia expanded her duties beyond cooking and childcare, helping with the vegetable garden, learning to make cheese from the milk of the ranch's 2 cows, and even assisting when one of the ranch hands' wives gave birth during a sudden thunderstorm that prevented the doctor from reaching them. One hot afternoon, Virginia was teaching the girls to make jam from wild berries they'd collected that morning when Ethan appeared at the kitchen door. His expression was serious. "Girls, Miss Abernathy has some new kittens at her store in town. Why don't you go with Miguel to see them? He's hitching up the wagon now." Sophie and Lily exchanged excited glances before racing off to find Miguel, one of the younger ranch hands who often helped with chores around the house. When they were gone, Ethan closed the kitchen door. "What is it?" Virginia asked, wiping her hands on her apron. Has something happened? Ethan ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of agitation. I received a letter today from a Mr. Robert Davis of Boston. Says he's your husband and wants to know your whereabouts. Virginia felt the blood drain from her face. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. Ex-husband, she corrected faintly. We were divorced more than a year ago. Ethan's expression darkened. The letter suggests otherwise. He claims you left without his permission and that he's coming to collect you. Virginia shook her head, panic rising in her throat. No, the divorce was granted. I have the papers. Her voice trailed off as she realized the papers were in her trunk, untouched since her arrival. Robert can't force me to return. We're no longer married. Are you certain the divorce was finalized? Ethan asked, his voice gentle but insistent. A terrible doubt crept into Virginia's mind. She'd left Boston so quickly, trusting her attorney to handle the final details. What if something had gone wrong? I believe so, she said, but her uncertainty was evident. Ethan crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, taking her trembling hands in his. Virginia, I need to know the truth, all of it. She looked up into his face, seeing concern rather than judgment, and the story spilled out her marriage to Robert Davis, a banker's son with political ambitions, their initial happiness, and then the devastating news that she could never conceive. Robert's cruel words, his affairs, his eventual demand for a divorce on grounds of her deficiency as a woman. I agreed to the divorce, she concluded, tears streaming down her face. My attorney assured me it would be granted. I left as soon as I could, answered your advertisement, and came west. I needed a new beginning. Ethan's jaw was tight, his eyes stormy. If that man thinks he can come here and claim you against your will, he'll find Wyoming territory operates differently than Boston society. Virginia wiped her tears with shaking hands. What should I do? First, find those papers. Then we'll wire your attorney in Boston for confirmation. If the divorce is legal, Davis has no claim on you. If not, he hesitated. We'll deal with that if it comes to it. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Virginia found the packet of legal documents in her trunk. To her immense relief, the divorce decree was there, properly signed and sealed. She showed it to Ethan, who studied it carefully before nodding. We'll still wire your attorney tomorrow, but this looks legitimate to me. Davis is either lying or unaware. Virginia sank into a chair, relief washing over her. Thank you, Ethan, for not judging me. He knelt beside her chair, his eyes level with hers. Virginia, you are the bravest, kindest woman I've ever known. Your ex-husband was a fool to let you go and a greater fool to think he has any right to you now. Without thinking, Virginia reached out to touch his cheek, rough with evening stubble. Ethan caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent warmth spiraling through her. I should go, he said roughly, rising to his feet. It's late. Virginia nodded, unable to speak, watching as he left the room. That night, she lay awake for hours, remembering the feel of his lips against her skin and wondering what it meant. The following week brought a telegram from Virginia's attorney confirming that her divorce had been finalized before she left Boston. Robert Davis had no legal claim to her. The relief Virginia felt was tempered by a new worry. What if Robert came anyway? What if he caused trouble for Ethan and the girls? Her fears materialized sooner than expected. Just 3 days after the telegram arrived, a fancy carriage rolled up to the ranch house. Virginia was gathering eggs in the hen house when she heard Sophie's excited call. Miss Virginia, there's a city man asking for you. Virginia's heart sank as she emerged from the hen house to see Robert Davis standing on the porch. immaculate in a tailored suit that looked absurdly out of place on the dusty ranch. Sophie was staring up at him with curiosity, while Lily had retreated to hide behind a porch pillar. "Virginia, my dear," Robert called, his Boston accent pronounced against the backdrop of the Wyoming wilderness. "What a charming establishment you found yourself in." Virginia straightened her spine and walked toward the house, basket of eggs in hand. "Robert, what are you doing here? Is that any way to greet your husband, after I've traveled so far to bring you home?" His smile was cold, nothing like the warm expression she'd once loved. "Ex-husband," Virginia corrected firmly. "As my attorney confirmed, our divorce was final before I left Boston." Robert's smile tightened. "A misunderstanding, easily rectified. Your place is in Boston, Virginia, not playing nursemaid in this backwater." Sophie's eyes widened. "You were married to him. But he's mean." Virginia couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. Children were remarkably perceptive. "Sophie, please take Lily inside and start on your lessons. I need to speak with Mr. Davis privately." Once the girls were inside, Virginia turned back to Robert. "You have no right to be here. The divorce is final, as you well know. I have no intention of returning to Boston." Robert descended the porch steps, moving closer to her. "Don't be difficult, Virginia. Your father's estate has finally been settled. There's more money than we expected." "As your husband, as nothing to me," Virginia interrupted. "You lost any claim to my father's estate when you divorced me for being barren." Robert's face darkened. "I've spoken with lawyers. The divorce can be contested. Your condition was not disclosed before our marriage." Virginia felt ice form in her veins. "You would perjure yourself for money." "For what's rightfully mine," Robert hissed, grabbing her arm. "I supported you for years, endured your failure as a wife. You owe me." "Let her go." Ethan's voice cut through the air like a whip. Virginia hadn't heard him approach, but suddenly he was there, his tall figure imposing as he strode toward them. Robert released her arm but didn't back away. "This doesn't concern you, Cowboy," he sneered. "This is between me and my wife." "Ex-wife," Ethan corrected, positioning himself between Virginia and Robert. "And it very much concerns me when a man threatens a woman under my protection on my land." Robert's eyes narrowed. "Your protection, I see. You found yourself a protector, Virginia. How convenient." "Mr. Davis," Ethan said, his voice dangerously calm, "I suggest you get back in your fancy carriage and return to Cheyenne. The next train east leaves tomorrow morning. I recommend you be on it." Robert gave a short, humorless laugh. "Or what exactly will you shoot me, Mr. Young?" "Ethan Young. And I won't need to shoot you. Sheriff Wilson is a personal friend. He takes a dim view of men who harass women, especially when those men have no legal standing to do so." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Robert's face. He glanced at Virginia, then back at Ethan. "This isn't over," he said finally. "A few telegrams to the right people in Boston and your precious divorce won't be worth the paper it's printed on." "Perhaps," Ethan conceded, "but by then it won't matter." He turned to Virginia, his eyes softening. "Virginia, I'd planned to do this differently, but circumstances have forced my hand." To her astonishment, he dropped to one knee before her, taking her free hand in his. "Virginia Davis, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Virginia stared at him in shock, her mind racing. Was this merely a ploy to drive Robert away, or did he truly mean it? The look in Ethan's eyes, tender, determined, and yes, loving, gave her answer. "Yes," she whispered, tears springing to her eyes. "Yes, Ethan, I will." Robert's face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. You can't possibly." "I believe the lady has made her choice," Ethan interrupted, rising to his feet. "Now, unless you'd like to congratulate us, I suggest you leave." For a moment, Robert seemed ready to argue further, but something in Ethan's stance, or perhaps the fact that several ranch hands had materialized nearby, hands resting casually on their gun belts, changed his mind. "You deserve each other," he spat, turning on his heel and stalking back to his carriage. As the vehicle disappeared in a cloud of dust, Virginia turned to Ethan. "Did you mean it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "The proposal?" Ethan took the basket of eggs from her hands, setting it carefully on the porch step before taking both her hands in his. "I've been trying to find the courage to ask you for weeks," he admitted. "This isn't how I planned it, but yes, Virginia, I meant every word. I love you." Tears spilled down Virginia's cheeks. "But you know I can't give you children. I can't." Ethan placed a gentle finger against her lips. "I already have a family, 2 beautiful nieces who love you as much as I do. If it's just the 4 of us for the rest of our days, I'll count myself the luckiest man in Wyoming." Virginia's heart felt too full for words. Instead, she stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his in answer. His arms wrapped around her, strong and secure, as he deepened the kiss. The moment was broken by Sophie's voice from the doorway. "Are you going to marry Uncle Ethan, Miss Virginia? Can we be flower girls?" Virginia laughed against Ethan's lips before turning to face the girls who were watching with wide eyes. "Yes, Sophie, I'm going to marry your uncle. And yes, you and Lily will be the prettiest flower girls in the territory." Lily, who had been hiding behind her sister, stepped forward with unusual boldness. "Does that mean you'll be our mama now?" Virginia felt Ethan's arm tighten around her waist as she knelt to the child's level. "If you'd like me to be, Lily, nothing would make me happier." Lily's small arms wrapped around Virginia's neck in a fierce hug. "I've been wishing for it every night," she whispered, "since you saved me from the creek." Virginia held the child close, her eyes meeting Ethan's over Lily's blonde head. The love she saw there healed something broken inside her, a wound inflicted long ago by doctors' pronouncements and a husband's rejection. She might never bear children of her own, but she had found motherhood all the same. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the small church in Cheyenne. The entire community turned out for the occasion, curious to see the Eastern lady who had captured the heart of one of the territory's most eligible ranchers. Virginia wore a simple gown of ivory satin with lace at the collar and cuffs, a gift from Ethan, who had secretly ordered it from Denver. Sophie and Lily preceded her down the aisle, scattering wildflower petals and beaming with pride in their new blue dresses. When Virginia reached the altar where Ethan waited, his eyes shining with emotion, she felt as though her journey had finally led her home. The minister's words washed over her as Ethan took her hands in his voice steady as he spoke his vows. "I, Ethan James Young, take thee, Virginia Elizabeth Davis, to be my lawfully wedded wife. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Virginia blinked back tears as she repeated her own vows, her voice carrying clearly through the small church. When Ethan slipped the gold band onto her finger, his mother's ring, he told her, saved for the woman he would love for a lifetime, she felt the last of her doubts melt away. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Ethan's kiss was gentle but fervent, a promise of the life they would build together. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, Virginia caught sight of Sophie and Lily watching with shining eyes, and her heart swelled with love for these children, who had become hers in every way that mattered. The celebration continued at the ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard and lanterns hung from trees. A fiddler and banjo player provided music for dancing, and Virginia found herself passed from partner to partner as the community welcomed her officially into their midst. As dusk fell, she finally found herself back in Ethan's arms for a waltz. "Happy, Mrs. Young," he murmured against her ear. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the girls were tucked into bed, Ethan led Virginia to the master bedroom, now their bedroom. He'd had the room repainted and furnished with a new bedstead and dresser, transforming it from a space of grief to one of new beginnings. "I love you, Virginia," he whispered as he drew her into his arms. "From the moment you jumped into that creek to save Lily, I knew you were the one I'd been waiting for." Virginia's hands traced the contours of his face, memorizing every line and plane. "And I love you, Ethan Young. You gave me a family when I thought that dream was lost forever." Their first night as husband and wife was tender and passionate, a culmination of the love that had grown between them over the months. As Virginia lay in Ethan's arms afterward, watching moonlight filter through the curtains, she felt a peace she had never known. Autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, and life at Circle Y settled into a new rhythm. Virginia embraced her role as wife and mother, finding joy in the simple moments, teaching Sophie to bake her grandmother's recipes, brushing Lily's hair before bed, welcoming Ethan home each evening with a kiss. As winter approached, Virginia noticed changes in herself: a persistent tiredness, a sensitivity to certain smells, a fullness to her breasts that hadn't been there before. She dismissed these symptoms at first, knowing her condition made certain explanations impossible. Yet as the signs continued, a fragile hope began to bloom. Finally, during a trip to Cheyenne for supplies, Virginia visited the doctor while Ethan took the girls to purchase new winter boots. Dr. Miller was a kind-faced woman, one of the few female physicians in the territory. She listened carefully to Virginia's history and symptoms before conducting a thorough examination. "Mrs. Young," she said afterward, "I believe congratulations are in order. You're approximately 3 months pregnant." Virginia stared at her in disbelief. "That's not possible." "I was told years ago that I could never conceive." Dr. Miller smiled gently. "Medicine is not an exact science, Mrs. Young. The human body is capable of remarkable things, especially when circumstances change. Your previous doctors may have been correct given your condition then, but sometimes new environments, reduced stress, or simply time can alter what we thought was permanent." Virginia's hands trembled as they rested on her still flat stomach. "A baby," she whispered. "Ethan's baby." "Yes, doctor." Miller confirmed. "Due in late spring by my estimation. You'll need to take extra care during the winter months, but you appear to be in excellent health otherwise." Virginia left the doctor's office in a daze of joy and disbelief. She decided to wait until they returned to the ranch to tell Ethan, wanting the moment to be private. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Virginia joined Ethan on the porch where he sat watching the first snowflakes of the season drift down. "Cold night," he commented, wrapping an arm around her as she settled beside him. "Winter's coming early this year." Virginia leaned into his warmth, gathering her courage. "Ethan, I have something to tell you." He looked down at her, his expression curious. "What is it, love?" "When we were in town today, I visited Dr. Miller." Virginia took a deep breath. "Ethan, I'm pregnant." For a moment he simply stared at her, disbelief written across his features. "But you said the doctors in Boston were wrong," Virginia finished. "Or perhaps something changed, doctor." "Miller says it happens sometimes." Joy bloomed across Ethan's face, transforming it. He pulled Virginia into his arms, holding her as though she were made of glass. "A baby," he murmured against her hair. "Our baby." Virginia nodded against his chest, tears of happiness wetting his shirt. "I never thought. I'd given up hope." Ethan drew back, framing her face with his hands. Virginia Young, you are a miracle. You came into our lives when we needed you most, brought laughter back to this house, and now this. His voice broke slightly. I don't know what I did to deserve such happiness, but I swear I'll spend the rest of my life being worthy of it. The following months passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Virginia's body changed, her stomach rounding as the baby grew within her. Sophie was fascinated by the process, asking endless questions about the baby and helping to prepare the nursery in the small room adjoining the master bedroom. Lily was more reserved in her excitement, sometimes pressing her small hand against Virginia's belly but rarely speaking about the coming child. One night, as Virginia tucked her into bed, Lily finally voiced her concern. "Will you love the new baby more than us?" she asked, her blue eyes serious in the lamplight. "Because it's really yours." Virginia's heart ached at the question. She sat on the edge of the bed, brushing Lily's fair hair from her forehead. "Lily, my love, you and Sophie are as much mine as this baby will be. Love doesn't divide, it multiplies. My heart has enough room for all of you." Lily considered this for a moment. "Papa used to say I was just like Mama. Do you think your baby will be just like you?" "Perhaps," Virginia smiled, "or like your Uncle Ethan. Or maybe the baby will be entirely themselves, just as you are entirely yourself. That's the wonder of family, we're all connected but unique." This seemed to satisfy Lily, who nodded solemnly before snuggling deeper under her quilt. "I think I'd like a baby brother," she decided. "Sophie says she wants a sister, but I think a brother would be better for catching frogs." Virginia laughed softly, kissing the child's forehead. "We'll have to wait and see what arrives, won't we?" Spring came early that year, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the soil. Virginia's time grew near, and Ethan insisted on bringing a midwife from Cheyenne to stay at the ranch for the final weeks of her pregnancy. Mrs. Blackwood was a no-nonsense woman with 30 years of experience delivering babies. She took up residence in the guest room, keeping a watchful eye on Virginia while teaching Sophie and Lily useful skills to occupy them during the waiting time. On a warm May morning, almost exactly a year after Virginia had first arrived at Circle Y, the baby decided to make its appearance. The labor was long but uncomplicated, with Ethan pacing outside the bedroom door despite Mrs. Blackwood's assurances that everything was proceeding normally. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the bedroom window, Virginia gave a final push, and the sound of a newborn's cry filled the room. "A fine boy," Mrs. Blackwood announced, cleaning and wrapping the infant before placing him in Virginia's arms. "Strong lungs on that one." Virginia gazed down at her son, taking in his shock of dark hair, Ethan's hair, and the tiny features that seemed somehow familiar and miraculous at once. When Ethan was finally allowed into the room, his face wet with tears, Virginia had never seen such wonder in a man's expression. "He's perfect," Ethan whispered, carefully sitting on the bed beside them. His finger traced the baby's cheek with infinite tenderness. "What shall we call him?" Virginia had been considering names for months, but in that moment only one seemed right. "James," she said softly, "after your brother." "James Thomas Young." Ethan's eyes filled with fresh tears. "James," he repeated. He would have been honored. He leaned forward to kiss Virginia's forehead. "Thank you, my love, for everything." A little while later, Sophie and Lily were allowed a brief visit to meet their cousin. They tiptoed into the room, wide-eyed with awe at the tiny bundle in Virginia's arms. "He's so small," Sophie whispered, peering at the baby's face. "Was I that small once?" "Even smaller," Ethan told her, lifting her onto the bed for a better view. "You were born early, your mama said." Lily hung back slightly, watching with solemn eyes until Virginia beckoned her closer. "Would you like to hold his hand, Lily? See, he's reaching for you." Indeed, the baby's tiny fingers were splayed, waving in the air. Lily carefully extended her index finger, and James gripped it with surprising strength. A smile broke across Lily's face, a full, joyous smile that transformed her usually serious countenance. "He likes me," she breathed, wonder in her voice. "Of course he does," Virginia assured her. "You're his family." That night, after the girls had been put to bed, and the baby was sleeping in his cradle beside their bed, Virginia found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. She slipped from the bed and moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape of the ranch, her home. Ethan joined her a moment later, his arms encircling her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "You should be resting," he murmured. "I'm too happy to sleep," she admitted. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find this has all been a dream, you, the girls, the baby." Ethan turned her in his arms, his eyes serious in the moonlight. "Not a dream, Virginia. A life we've built together. A life we'll continue building day by day." Virginia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "When I answered your advertisement, I was running away from my past. I never imagined I was running toward my future." "Providence," Ethan said softly, echoing the thought Virginia had had that first night at Circle Y. "Or fate. Whatever brought you to us, I thank God for it every day." They stood together at the window, watching over their sleeping ranch, their family complete in ways neither could have imagined a year before. Virginia Davis had come west to cook for a cowboy and found herself mother to his orphaned nieces. Along the way, she had discovered that family wasn't defined by blood alone, but by love freely given and received. The barrenness she had once believed defined her had given way to abundance, an abundance of love, of purpose, and yes, of motherhood in all its forms. As James stirred in his cradle, beginning to fuss, Virginia turned from the window, ready to tend to her son. This was her life now, full of challenges and joys, hard work and tender moments. It wasn't the life she had once envisioned in Boston, but standing in the moonlit bedroom of a Wyoming ranch house, her husband by her side and her children, all three of them safe under their roof, Virginia knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The years that followed brought more joy to Circle Y Ranch. James grew into a sturdy, curious boy with Ethan's quiet strength and Virginia's gentle determination. Sophie blossomed into a talented young horsewoman, often riding the range with Ethan to check on the cattle. Lily discovered a gift for storytelling, filling notebooks with tales of ranch life that sometimes found their way into the local newspaper. 2 years after James's birth, Virginia presented Ethan with another surprise twin girls they named Elizabeth and Margaret, who brought a new level of happy chaos to the household. The doctors in Boston had been wrong indeed. Virginia's body, perhaps healed by the clean air and open spaces of Wyoming, proved capable of creating life after all. But even surrounded by her biological children, Virginia never forgot the precious gift she had received that day she tumbled from the stagecoach in Cheyenne, the opportunity to be mother to 2 girls who needed her as much as she needed them. Sophie and Lily might not have been born from her body, but they were born in her heart, the first children to call her Mama, and mean it with every fiber of their beings. On warm summer evenings, the family would gather on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over land that now stretched for thousands of acres. Circle Y had prospered under Ethan's careful management and Virginia's practical support. As darkness fell and stars appeared in the vast Wyoming sky, Virginia would look at her family, her husband, their 5 children, sometimes joined by ranch hands and their families, and marvel at the journey that had brought her here. From a barren woman fleeing shame in Boston to the heart of a thriving family in the West, Virginia Young had found not just a home but a place where she truly belonged. And in the end, isn't that what we all seek? Not just shelter from the storm, but a place where our hearts can put down roots and grow toward the light.